Very good morning to all of you. And today we'll discuss the coagulation disorders in obstetrics. As you know, there are many significant changes in pregnancy of the coagulation system, and so that there is a hypercoagulatory state is produced during normal pregnancy. So this has a aim. This has aim to prevent the blood loss during pregnancy and also during labor and also in puerperium, and most importantly, to prevent the blood loss during the third stage of labor, during the placental separation of third stage of labor, which causes PPH. So the main aim is to prevent PPH. So there are many pregnancy complications which may also cause the life-threatening condition, that is disseminated intravascular coagulation, and which completely disrupts the coagulation or coagulation profile in pregnancy. So mainly we'll discuss about the acquired causes, and out of that disseminated intravascular coagulation, the main thing we'll discuss in detail. And as you know, first we'll discuss what is the coagulation profile or mechanism in normal pregnancy. So to limit the blood loss after trauma, it is essential to seal bleeding vessels without affecting blood flow permanently. The hemostasis, which is defined as the arrest of bleeding, and this process of hemostasis is a dynamic and delicate equilibrium between coagulation and fibrinolysis. Coagulation causes the deposition of the fibrin, and fibrinolysis causes fibrin lysis, breaking down of fibrin, opposite mechanisms. So coagulation results from an interaction among vessel walls and platelets and coagulation factors. Following endothelial damage, platelets adhere to the subendothelium, forming a platelet plug, which then becomes permanent with deposition of the fibrin. Then again, the vessel wall can be contracted by the vasoconstrictors, what is derived from the platelet, from the injured endothelial surface. And also the hemostasis can be maintained by the vasoconstriction and by the pressure, tissue pressure by the hematoma or from the external pressure applied to stop the bleeding. Then the clot formation is limited by antithrombin and protein C and S. As there is antithrombin, then there is non-formation of fibrin from the fibrinogen. So there is clot formation is restricted by antithrombin. The fibrinolytic system functions to maintain the fluid state through the breakdown of the fibrin by plasmin. So during normal pregnancy, both systems are essential, because to prevent the blood loss, the fibrin deposition is essential, as well as to make the pattern of the vessels. Fibrinolytic system is also essential. By breaking down the fibrin, it maintains the patterns of the vessels. So both are required and both works side by side simultaneously. So there is balance between these two, and usually there is state of hypercoagulability during pregnancy. Then plasmin is generated from the plasminogen by the action of tissue plasminogen activator, TPA, or tissue plasminogen activator. Usually then plasmin is generated, then which acts on the fibrin and forming the FDP, fibrin degradation products, which is not coagulable, and there is patterns of the vessels and may cause also bleeding. So pregnancy, there is increase in majority of clotting factors. Almost all clotting factors are increased except factor 11 and 13. And so there is major increase in the majority of clotting factors and a decrease in the quantity of natural anticoagulants and a reduction in fibrinolytic system. So coagulation system is in upper hand than that of the fibrinolytic activity. So there is no bleeding and there is a state of hypercoagulatory state during pregnancy, so that it prevents bleeding during pregnancy and labor and puerperium. Then state of hypercoagulability are likely due to hormonal changes and increase the risk of thromboembolism. So when there is hypercoagulatory state is present in case of normal pregnancy with another factor, triggering factor, if is there, then it may cause more risk of or increased risk of thromboembolism. Increase in clotting activity is greatest at the time of delivery with placental expulsion releasing thromboplastic substances. So thromboplastin is released or thromboplastin is released, then prothrombin to thrombin, then fibrinogen to fibrin, then fibrin strands, cross-link fibrin strands, which cause the coagulation, stop bleeding, and it may simulate clot formation. That is thromboplastin stimulate clot formation to stop maternal blood loss. Considerable hemorrhage can occur if clotting fails. Coagulation and fibrinolysis generally return to pre-pregnant levels 3 to 4 weeks postpartum. Then about platelets, the platelet count decreases in normal pregnancy, possibly due to increased destruction and hemodilution with a maximal decrease in the third trimester. Then coagulation factors, all coagulation factors are increased during pregnancy except the factor 11 and 13 and like that. And fibrinogen also increases during pregnancy with levels at term 200% above the pre-pregnant levels. So this is the coagulation mechanism and also the fibrinolytic system. As you know, due to any factors, triggering factors, both extrinsic and intrinsic, according to enzyme cascade theory, both pathways are stimulated, and finally there is common pathway leading to conversion of thrombin from prothrombin. Then there is conversion of fibrin from fibrinogen. Then this fibrin, again, that is fibrin monomer, and polymerization of the fibrin monomer occurs, leading to polymerization of the fibrin, and then there is fibrin cross-linked fibrin strands. Strands are formed, which is insoluble polymer, so it blocks the vessels, causing thrombosis and no bleeding. And in case of fibrinolytic system, again, when there is thromboembolism or coagulation mechanism is is there, simultaneously there is stimulation of fibrinolytic system. So there is plasminogen activators are there by which the inactive plasminogen is converted to plasmin. Then this plasmin again acts on the insoluble polymer fibrin, and it splits or break down. So there is fibrin degradation products are formed, which are small products, and it cannot block. So there is again patency of the vessels, or there is, if there is more fibrinolysis, then there is more bleeding. Other factors either remain at non-pregnant level or decrease during pregnancy, that is 11 and 13 will decrease, and factor 13, which is responsible for stabilizing fibrin, increases in the first trimester, but by term it is 50% of non-pregnant levels. Then factor 5, concentrations increase in early pregnancy, then decrease and stabilize. Factor 2 or prothrombin levels may increase or not change in early pregnancy, but are normally normal by term. Then the fibrinolysis, that is also required, essential for the patency of the vessels, but more fibrinolysis means there is chance of more bleeding. So fibrinolysis is reduced in pregnancy due to decrease in tissue plasminogen activator activity, which remains low until 1 hour postpartum when activity returns to normal. This reduction is due to the gradual, eventually threefold increase in plasminogen activator inhibitor 1 and the increasing levels of plasminogen activator inhibitor 2, PAI2, or urokinase U, PAI2. Then the placenta produces PAI1 and is the primary source of PAI2 or plasminogen activator inhibitor 2, and plasminogen activator inhibitor 2 levels at term are 25 times that of normal plasma. So active inhibitors are more, so there is less fibrinolysis. So thrombin is the main, thrombin plays a main role or central role in the coagulation factor. As you know, thrombin, by thrombin, fibrin is formed from the fibrinogen, and also thrombin activated fibrinolysis inhibitor, it also inhibits the fibrin degradation products from fibrin. So it has a main role in the coagulation system. Postpartum tissue plasminogen activator levels quickly return to normal as PA1 levels decrease. However, PA2 levels remain elevated for a few days. Then thrombin activatable fibrinolysis inhibitor, another that is important also. So thrombin activatable fibrinolysis inhibitor, TAFI, levels are increased in the third trimester. That is our inhibitor. Then D-dimer, that is which is produced from the breakdown of the fibrin by the plasmin. These D-dimer levels increase in pregnancy but are not thought to indicate intravascular coagulation as fibrinolysis is depressed. And these D-dimers may originate from the uterus. Then what are the disorders of coagulation in pregnancy? So there are, first is clotting factor abnormality, that is congenital coagulopathies or acquired coagulopathies. Congenital coagulopathies like von Willebrand's disease, hemophilia, and B, antithrombin deficiency and acquired coagulopathies include mainly pregnancy-induced hypertension, placental abruption, which is the commonest one is abruptio of placenta, and retained dead fetus, and amniotic fluid embolism, liver disease, anticoagulants, aspirin, heparin, or any infection. So out of this, the abruptio placentae is most common, and the next is the infection. Then platelet abnormalities like quantitative abnormalities like gestational thrombocytopenia, idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura, and HELP syndrome, that is hemolysis, EL for elevated liver enzyme, and LP means low platelet count. So it occurs in fulminant preeclampsia or severe preeclampsia or imminent preeclampsia, HELP syndrome. So it may also cause DIC and disseminated intravascular coagulation. All the acquired coagulopathies may cause a life-threatening condition, that is disseminated intravascular coagulation, which is most important from the obstetric point of view, and we will discuss in detail about disseminated intravascular coagulation. And another is qualitative disorders like poor platelet function. So the most important and most dangerous and most life-threatening condition in obstetrics and more probably in the whole medicine, this is disseminated intravascular coagulopathy, because it is a life-threatening condition. If not treated early and effectively, then there is risk of maternal and prenatal morbidity and mortality even. So obstetrical bleeding remain to be the worldwide main cause of maternal mortality. Early identification of factors leading to hemorrhage and rapid management of the underlying pathological process is the keystone of the treatment. So the prognosis depends upon the underlying pathology causing DIC. So the underlying pathology should be treated immediately and effectively so that the prognosis of DIC will be good. Otherwise, it is worse. Then, most important pregnancy-related condition leading to bleeding with high mortality and morbidity rates is disseminated intravascular coagulation or DIC. So DIC was first described by Joseph D. Lee in 1901 as a fatal hemorrhagic diastasis following placental abruption or abruptio placentae. So usually the identified causes of obstetrical DIC were most common is abruptio placentae, and next is postpartum hemorrhage or bleeding, then severe preeclampsia or HELP syndrome, then acute fatty liver pregnancy, and sepsis, and amniotic fluid embolism. So intrauterine fetal loss, intrauterine fetal death, IUD, or intrauterine fetal loss is also reported as a cause of DIC when it is retained, or intrauterine fetal death is retained inside the utero for more than 4 weeks, prolonged retention of intrauterine fetal death. Then placental abruption or abruptio placentae is a pathology characterized by rupture of maternal decidual artery resulting in hemorrhage into the decidual placental interface. So there is premature separation of placenta in case of abruptio placentae, where the placenta is situated in the usual upper uterine segment, but there is separation of the placenta that leading to abruptio placentae. It may cause also DIC that is the most commonest cause of DIC in obstetrics. Then placental insufficiency and uteroplacental hypoperfusion are postulated to be the other causes. Then pro-inflammatory cytokines cause premature separation of the placenta. These are all the causes of DIC in abruptio placentae. And then in postpartum bleeding, the severe amount of blood loss and subsequent consumption of coagulation factors is held responsible for the development of DIC. When there is coagulation, consumption of coagulation or clot formation, there is consumption of coagulation factors that is also leading to bleeding. Usually in disseminated intravascular coagulation, there is widespread deposition of microvascular thrombin inside the microvessels, so that will cause blockage of the vessels and of different organs, leading the multi-organ failure. Then what are the obstetric causes and non-obstetric causes of DIC? Obstetric causes of DIC like amniotic fluid embolism, abruptio placentae, placenta previa and acreta, postpartum hemorrhage or bleeding, and HELLP syndrome, preeclampsia, eclampsia or severe pregnancy-induced hypertension, and septic aversion, intrauterine infection or chorioamnitis, and or acute fatty liver of pregnancy. The non-obstetric causes of DIC are sepsis, trauma, organ damage, leukemia, and vascular aneurysm, acute liver failure, and toxic and immunological causes, and narcotic drugs, and ABO incompatibility and transplant rejection. Then what are the triggering factors of DIC? Endothelial injury in case of preeclampsia, eclampsia, HELLP syndrome, septicemia, septic aversion, chorioamnitis, pyelonephritis, and hypovolemia, and it may be DIC may be due to a release of thromboplastin linked to widespread microvascular coagulation, and it may occur in case of amniotic fluid embolism, dead fetus syndrome, abruptio placentae, hydatidiform mole, cesarean section, and intraamniotic hypotension saline, which is done in case of second trimester. MTP, but this is not now used, it is abandoned, and shock, then release of phospholipids, incompatibility, hemolysis, and septicemia. Then most important is abruptio placentae, which is the most commonest cause of DIC in obstetrics, and bleeding in these patients can largely be concealed and retroplacenta. So DIC is more common in case of concealed abruptio placentae or mixed variety, or when there is big retroplacental clot formation in case of abruptio placentae. And up to 30% of patients may develop coagulopathy. And fluid resuscitation to correct hypovolemia and early delivery to stop bleeding is essential, and also blood transfusion may be required, but the early delivery and very effective treatment should be given, and liberalization of the cesarean section should be done if required, but termination of pregnancy is the most important aim for the treatment, because when there is termination of pregnancy, then it cures DIC. Then retained dead fetus, usually more than 4 weeks of duration. When the dead fetus is retained in utero, there is chance of coagulopathy due to absorption of the thromboplastin and causing the thrombocoagulation. And this coagulopathy is not apparent until very late stages because as it is a slow process. So there is slow liberation of the thromboplastin. So it takes more time, not acute. So it is usually subacute on chronic variety unless like that of abruptio placentae, which is acute variety of DIC. So due to early detection and induction of labor in these patients, this is a rare occurrence. It is usually termination of or product of conception or return dead fetus is done because of by use of prostaglandins, which is now available and is the most effective drug. So it can be terminated early so that there is less chance of DIC. Then another condition causing DIC is that is also most life-threatening condition, that is amniotic fluid embolism. Commonly, fatal obstetric complications caused by introduction of amniotic fluid into the maternal circulation. Amniotic fluid is rich in thromboplastin and debris, which blocks the pulmonary vessels. So, amniotic fluid embolism is signaled by the sudden onset of respiratory distress and profound hypotension and arterial hypoxemia and coma. The entry of amniotic fluid into the pulmonary circulation results in the amniotic fluid rich in thromboplastin and also debris enter into the pulmonary circulation, then it blocks the pulmonary circulation, then leading to anoxia, and there is pulmonary vascular obstruction and leading to decrease in cardiac output and blood pressure and pulmonary hypertension with cor pulmonale and ventilation perfusion mismatches causing severe arterial hypoxemia. Then hemorrhage is inevitable due to DIC and there is microthrombi formation, and simultaneously there is release of plasminogen activator from the injured pulmonary vessels, endothelium of the pulmonary vessels. There is release of the plasminogen activators, so leading to increased fibrinolysis. Then there is again bleeding, and again there is secondary fibrinolysis because there is plasminogen activators are released. Then hemorrhage is inevitable due to DIC, and usually there is no specific treatment. Usually there is Decadron is given and symptomatic treatment is given and treatment of the DIC, and sometimes heparin is also given, but it is very cautiously it should be given because it is as it is antithrombotic, it may also cause bleeding as side effect, though it prevents the thromboembolism, but there is chance of bleeding. So it should be cautiously and rightly it should be used. Heparin and Decadron is also given, and cardiopulmonary resuscitation, replacement of intravascular fluid volume and treatment of DIC from the treatment. Then pregnancy-induced hypertension or PIH, that is severe pregnancy-induced hypertension may result in DIC. So in case of PIH, the PIH can be associated with the low platelet levels. 50% of the patients can have levels very less, and increased destruction of platelets due to immunological mechanism, and coagulation screening shows prolonged bleeding time and partial thromboplastin time with increased levels of fibrin split products, and again liver is affected in severe pregnancy and hypertension, so there is less production of the procoagulant factors, so there is bleeding. Then liver impairment in pregnancy can be due to hepatitis, acute fatty liver of pregnancy, and cholestasis, and hepatic rupture secondary to the cholestasis, and HELLP syndrome. Treatment should be with vitamin K, as there are some factors are vitamin K dependent, and also fresh frozen plasma is given to increase the procoagulant levels. In preeclampsia, the maternal inflammatory responses form against trophoblasts results in a systemic endothelial dysfunction. Vasodilator, prostaglandins or prostacyclin decrease, and thrombocytic aggregation and uteroplacental ischemia increases. HELLP syndrome or severe preeclampsia is a syndrome characterized by the endothelial cell damage in the liver, and substances originating in the placenta cause an acute inflammatory state in the hepatic endothelial cells. Septic aversion causes DIC by triggering the release of inflammatory substances which are eventually disrupting the coagulation mechanism. Endothelial dysfunction plays a key role in the pathophysiology of septic aversion. As you know, in pregnancy is a hypercoagulable state. So if another triggering factor is present, like association of endotoxin from the septic aversion, it may cause again DIC. One triggering factor is sufficient in case of pregnancy, which is hypercoagulable state. So here in septic aversion, endotoxin is a triggering factor, and so there is DIC is resulted, unlike the Schwarzman reaction. In Schwarzman reaction, two factors are needed, but here one factor is sufficient, like endotoxin, because there is already one factor is there, like hypercoagulatory state of the pregnancy. So what is the pathophysiology of DIC? It is a systemic thrombohemorrhagic system or disorder developing secondary to the certain clinical conditions. There must be underlying conditions. It is secondary to certain. Secondarily, it is never primary. The coagulant response is initiated with the formation of tissue factor and subsequent binding to the factor 7A. As a result, factor 10 is activated, and thus prothrombin is converted to thrombin. And thrombin plays a central role in coagulant, anticoagulant, fibrinolytic, and antifibrinolytic mechanisms. The coagulant, besides being a procoagulant, converting fibrinogen to fibrin, thrombin also controls anticoagulation by activating protein C. So fibrinolysis is degradation of fibrin to fibrin split products or fibrin degradation products via tissue plasminogen activator by the thrombin. So tissue plasminogen activator activates the plasminogen to plasmin, which degrades the fibrin to fibrin split products or fibrin degradation products. And thrombin also regulates fibrinolysis by activating the active fibrinolysis inhibitor. Then thrombin plays a central role in coagulant, the same we have discussed. It plays a central role. Fibrinogen levels double during the pregnancy compared to prior to the pregnancy. Also, D-dimer level rise during the pregnancy. So it's not specific for the fibrinolysis because D-dimer level also rise during the pregnancy. In response to activation of cytokines, release of procoagulant factors or exposure to procoagulant factors all predisposing factors leading to disseminated intravascular coagulation initiate the activation of the coagulation cascade, enzyme cascade theory, as you know, intrinsic extrinsic pathway as part of the systemic inflammatory response. Then coagulation occurs or formation or deposition of the microthrombi formation in different organs leading to organ failure. Pathogenesis is a complex mechanism in which the FIFO increased thrombin production plays a central role. So here the pathogenesis is complex. There are multiple mechanisms in pathogenesis. So it is very difficult to manage also. During treatment is very difficult. Usually there is empirical treatment is given initially because there are so many complex mechanisms, multiple mechanisms are responsible in case of initiation of disseminated intravascular coagulation. Increased tissue factor production, anticoagulation system dysfunction, insufficient fibrinolysis, and increased ionotic phospholipid concentration leads to development of disseminated intravascular coagulation. So DIC is an acquired thromboembolic disease, where the clinical findings usually depend on the primary underlying pathology or conditions. So it is usually secondary, never primary. DIC is never primary. Usually it is secondary to the underlying causes. In early stage acute period, a massive thrombin production takes place as a result of exposure of blood to excessive amount of tissue factor. Again, there is fibrinolysis initiated or stimulated, so there is also bleeding. So usually DIC may be two types, acute DIC or subacute or chronic DIC. Usually the acute DIC is a hemorrhagic variety where there is plasminogen is increased, so that there is increased fibrinolysis and bleeding. But in case of subacute or chronic DIC, it is a stage of thrombin formation or deposition due to more liberation of the thrombin. So usually it is less severe in chronic variety, that is thromboembolic stage. It is less severe than that of acute stage where there is severe bleeding may occur. The clinical picture varying from bleeding to thrombosis. Usually the bleeding is more concerned than the thrombosis in case of DIC. End organ damage at the microvascular level ensues as a result of fibrin accumulation or deposition in the intravascular bed. Microvascular bed is blocked by the deposition of the fibrin. Condition of patients are often critical in DIC along with parallelism between the findings and severity of the illness. And bleeding is usually the most frequent clinical finding than that of features of thromboembolism. Then what is the interaction between coagulation and fibrinolytic pathways? First, there is widespread intravascular thrombin formation, thrombin generation from the prothrombin, then deposition of fibrin in microcirculation from the fibrinogen, leading to ischemic tissue damage and multi-organ dysfunction and leading to organ failure, mostly kidney, renal failure. Then there may be secondary fibrinolysis, then leading to vessel patency due to degradation of the fibrin and formation of FDP, and diffuse bleeding may occur, and production of fibrin degradation products or fibrin speed products or D-dimer. Then there may be RBC damage and hemolysis because the RBCs has to pass through the clot. So there is less path to pass through. So there is the RBC is very difficult to pass through the clot, presence of clot. So there is RBC, the shape of RBC also changed. Then consumption of platelets and coagulation factors, as there is thrombin formation, then fibrinogen and fibrin is formed. So there is, when there is a big clot is formed, then there is more consumption of the platelets and coagulation factor occurs. So there is diffuse bleeding or more bleeding. So big clot consumes more platelets and coagulation factors, leading to more bleeding. Then what are the clinical features of DIC? It manifests usually according to three pathological conditions. Number one is bleeding from different sides. Number two, due to septic infection or septic shock. And number three, due to multi-organ involvement. Then usually it may manifest bleeding disorders or bleeding features like ecchymosis, petechiae, mucosal oozing, prolonged bleeding at vein puncture sites, surgical incision sites, and from various systems, especially the gastrointestinal system, or when there is vaginal delivery with epistomy, there may be hematoma formation, vaginal hematoma formation, or from the cesarean section sites, or from the PPH. Even if the uterus is contracted, then there is postpartum hemorrhage is there. So when the uterus is contracted and there is no traumatic source and still there is PPH, then DIC is suspected. Then altered mental status, acute renal failure, again according to the organs involved. If the brain is involved, then there is altered mental status or seizures, and if it is kidney is involved, then there may be acute renal failure, and there may be long and adult respiratory distress syndrome. So hypoxia and hypovolemic shock may occur as a result of blood loss. Then abdominal compartment syndrome is a condition in which tissue perfusion and organ functions are adversely affected due to increased pressures in an enclosed anatomical space, leading to disruption of the circulation. Presents itself as cardiovascular insufficiency, respiratory failure, renal dysfunction, increased intra-abdominal pressure, and abdominal distension, and improves with prompt surgical decompression. Then, how to diagnose? Awareness of the obstetric conditions that may trigger DIC and the presenting clinical features is essential. Often the urgency of the situation and the lack of sophisticated laboratory facilities prevent definite hematological tests. Interpretation of the test results may also be difficult because the DIC process is so dynamic that results, when available, will often not reflect the current status of the woman. In severe cases of DIC, virtually all of the tests of coagulation and fibrinolysis will be abnormal, usually prolonged, but in milder cases, the results are variable. The usual common and simple test is clot absorption test or bedside clot test, most available and simplest test. An abnormal test indicates gross abnormality of the coagulation system. It is done by taking 5 ml of blood in a glass tube or syringe, holding it in your fist to keep it warm, while inverting and tipping the tube 3 or 4 times and observing the following. If clotting time is prolonged, if it takes more than 7 to 8 minutes, a clot to form, and clot retraction, clot should be able to withstand inversion of the tube after 30 minutes and should not lyse or break down within 1 hour. And clot should occupy at least half of the blood sample. When laboratory facilities are available, the platelet levels may be low or progressively low platelet count, and activated partial thromboplastin time is prolonged, and prolonged prothrombin time or INR will become prolonged, and thrombin time is also prolonged, and fibrinogen level are normally increased in pregnancy to 400 to 650 milligram per deciliter. In DIC, the level falls but may be in the normal non-pregnant race fibrinogen level. With severe DIC, the fibrinogen level usually falls below 150 milligram per deciliter, and the critical level is 100 milligram per deciliter. And FTP levels 80 per ml confirms DIC diagnosis. And a blood film or blood smear may show abnormally shaped helmet or tear-shaped RBCs and fragmented red blood cells, cystocytes, alteration of the normal red blood cells, as these are pushed through the fibrin mesh and the obstructed capillary bed. Usually it indicates the thromboembolism, not the fibrinolysis. The laboratory findings showing fibrin production is made indirectly by the measuring the fibrin degradation products and D-dimer. FDPs and D-dimers are tests used in the diagnosis of DIC. However, a diagnosis of DIC cannot be established based only on elevated D-dimers, as these are also increased in case of recent surgery or inflammation or trauma. Along with the rise in D-dimer levels and a decrease in the thrombocyte counts and changes in the coagulation time have been accepted as important laboratory findings of DIC. If there are less than 4 thrombocytes, platelets in high power field, it indicates platelet levels is low, hypothrombocytopenia. Then a prolonged prothrombin time and accelerated APTT is seen in 50 to 69% of cases. A normal or even certain PT and APTT level is seen in half of the DIC cases. Repeating these tests in the follow-up of these patients is highly important. Fibrinogen is a frequently used test in the diagnosis of the DIC, but less specific. And fibrinogen is an acute phase reactant, and plasma levels therefore may run for a long period of time within normal limits, independent of the consumption of the coagulation factors. So measurement of the serial or sequential fibrinogen levels are important. In pregnancy, PT and APTT levels shorten based on increasing coagulation factors, and during pregnancy, even if the consumption of coagulation factor associated with the DIC leads to prolongation of PT and APTT levels, they may still be within normal limits. Physiological thrombocytopenia associated with pregnancy should be considered while diagnosing DIC, and in serial analysis, the decline in platelet counts provides information about the increase in thrombin formation and associated development of DIC, not of fibrinolysis. Level of fibrinogen, an acute phase reactant, rise in pregnancy. Considering the double-fold increase in baseline fibrinogen levels during pregnancy, it is not surprising to encounter fibrinogen levels which are within normal limits. So D-dimer levels are already elevated in pregnancy, while a very significant rise in serial measurements can diagnose DIC. Then what is the treatment? The main goal of the treatment in DIC is to correct the underlying cause like abrasive placenty, amniotic embolism, and retained product of dead fetus, and septic shock or septic shock and amniotic embolism, or the underlying cause should be treated effectively and quickly. Once the precipitating cause is addressed, DIC usually resolves and prognosis is good. And besides this, supportive treatment should be implemented to correct the coagulation disorder. Then replacement of blood and blood products should be given. Then according to the deficiency, the blood or blood coagulation products components should be given, and usually fresh blood should be given than the stored blood. And if fresh frozen plasma are not feasible due to concern of fluid overload, non-activated prothrombin complex concentrate (PCC) may be administered at 25 to 30 units per kg dose. Then in congenital isolated fibrinogen deficiencies with levels less than 1 gram per liter, cryoprecipitate or fibrinogen factor concentrates should be used. Since the fibrinogen consumption may be faster, fibrinogen concentrates should be administered for values above 1 gram per liter in DIC. 4 gram of fibrinogen concentrates increase serum fibrinogen level to 1 gram per liter. Then, what is the management of the massive bleeding? Obstetrical bleeding are the most common reason of the maternal mortality. No alterations in vital signs until 10 to 15% of the blood volume has been lost. Tachycardia is the first finding of the bleeding. 30% of the blood volume may have been lost by the time the severe hypotension is noted. Management of the postpartum bleeding warrants medical, mechanical, and surgical interventions requiring significant amount of blood and blood products. Replacement of the blood and blood products should be similar to the approach to the trauma patients. Then maintain the patients as normotensive, normothermic, and ensure adequate replacement of clotting factors. First of all, 2 large bore peripheral IV lines should be placed. Then initiation of crystalloid or colloid fluids remains a controversy because colored solutions may affect coagulation, and rapid transfusion of volume expanders may lead to dilution of coagulation factors. So blood replacement should be implemented as soon as possible. Fresh blood transfusion and ORS negative blood transfusion must be started in emergency. Then erythrocyte suspensions and fresh frozen plasma and platelet transfusion and fibrinogen can be administered. Then many of the clotting factors increase and anticoagulation factors decrease, causing augmented coagulation and decreased fibrinolysis. Pre-existing coagulopathies may affect the course of pregnancy, and nature of coagulopathy may also be modified by pregnancy. So maintain the organ perfusion, different multi-organ failure may occur. So maintain the organ perfusion is the most urgent one, and the rapid infusion of Ringer's lactate, a normal saline, and rapid replacement of the whole blood, and swift treatment of the initiating cause, and maintenance of organ perfusion are all that is required. Once the DIC has been removed, the liver will replenish adequate levels of most coagulation factors within 24 hours. So platelet count may take 5 to 6 days to return to normal. Then administer oxygen by face mask intermittently, and monitor the above by central venous pressure line if possible, monitor the urine output, and monitor the complete blood count. Then replacement of procoagulants, fresh plasma, precipitates, and platelet, and inhibition of the disseminated intravascular coagulation and fibrinolysis. Heparin is controversial when there is overt thromboembolism. Heparin can be given in a dose of 5,000 units 4 to 6 hourly, or the recommended for cases of chronic DIC such as intrauterine death syndrome. Chronic DIC is considered less severe, and it is not recommended when there is patient bleeding profusely because heparin therapy also causes bleeding as side effect. Then ESA or epsilon aminocapric acid inhibits the conversion of the plasminogen to plasmin. So plasminogen inhibitor, so there is no formation of plasmin, so there is no degradation of the fibrin, so there is no bleeding. So it counteracts the secondary fibrinolysis, but it is also again controversial. So to summarize, pregnancy is a hypercoagulable state. Fibrinogen level increased to 500 milligram per deciliter. factors 7, 8, 9, 10 increase progressively throughout pregnancy. Platelet count registers a small during pregnancy. DIC is a secondary to an antecedent disease state like placental abruption, preeclampsia, prolonged retention of dead fetus, or amniotic fluid embolism. Mechanism of DIC, inappropriate activation of the coagulation cascade within maternal circulation as a result of endothelial cell injury with deposition of fibrin in multiple organs, microvascular deposits, and fibrinolysis leading to bleeding. Management involves prompt removal of the products of conception and supportive intensive treatment for correction of shock, acidosis, and tissue ischemia. Administration of fresh blood transfusion and blood component therapy. So DIC is a very peculiar and this dynamic process and also controversial subject, because in DIC there occurs both thrombocoagulation and also fibrinolysis. So in one condition, that is thrombocoagulation needs antithrombotic, which side effect of bleeding. But in case of fibrinolysis, there is also bleeding. So it is very controversial subject. Thank you. Any doubt or any question? Any question you can put? Any doubt? Okay.